if I told you that one single man, without ever intending to, set off a chain of events that would lead to the deaths of tens of millions of people? No gun in his hand. No army under his command. No evil plot to dominate the world. Just one mistake, one moment, one accident that changed the course of history forever. This isn't the story of a mass murderer or a conqueror like Genghis Khan or even a dictator like Hitler. This is the story of how one man's actions unleashed one of the deadliest events the world has ever known, causing more deaths than any battle, any bomb, or any ruler in human history. Stay with me until the end of this story because you're going to see how something so small can snowball into a global catastrophe. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe if you love uncovering the hidden stories of history. The man behind the catastrophe. The man in question wasn't a soldier, a king, or even someone history books usually focus on. His name was Hastings Guilford, though depending on which account you read, different versions of this story highlight different individuals. But the figure most historians point to is a soldier stationed in Kansas during World War I. This man was an ordinary army cook at Camp Funston, part of Fort Riley, Kansas, in early 1918. His name was Albert Gitchell. On March 4, 1918, Gitchell reported sick with what seemed like a normal cold or flu, aches, fever, and fatigue. Nothing unusual. Soldiers got sick all the time, especially in the crowded, unsanitary conditions of war camps. But Gitchell was not carrying just a common cold. He had unknowingly become patient zero of what would soon spiral into one of the deadliest pandemics in recorded history, the Spanish flu. How one man's illness became everyone's problem. The problem wasn't that Gitchell got sick, it was where he got sick. Camp Funston was home to over 50,000 soldiers preparing to ship off to Europe for the war effort. The perfect breeding ground for disease. Within days of Gitchell's illness, hundreds of soldiers in the camp fell ill with the same strange and violent flu. Unlike typical seasonal influenza that mostly threatens the very young and very old, this virus struck hardest at healthy young adults, the very demographic of soldiers preparing for battle. Because soldiers lived, ate, and trained in close quarters, the infection spread like wildfire. Within a week, the camp hospital was overflowing. Doctors were baffled. Some soldiers recovered, but many developed severe pneumonia and died within days. Still, the war machine couldn't stop. Soldiers kept training, kept boarding ships, and soon carried the virus from Kansas to Europe. And from there, the world. The global spread. By mid-1918, the flu had crossed oceans. Troop movements in crowded trenches in France became the perfect incubator. Soldiers coughed, sneezed, and spread it to comrades and civilians alike. Within months, outbreaks were reported in England, France, Spain, and beyond. Because Spain was neutral in World War I, its press wasn't censored like in other countries. Spanish newspapers reported openly on the outbreak ravaging their population. That's why people started calling it the Spanish flu, even though the first known cases came from Kansas. The irony: Spain got the blame for a pandemic that likely started in the United States, all because one man got sick and the news broke there first. The death toll mounts. Between 1918 and 1920, the Spanish flu tore through the globe in 3 devastating waves. First wave, spring 1918, it spread quickly, but seemed relatively mild, like a bad flu season. People got sick, many recovered. It was concerning, but not yet catastrophic. Second wave, fall 1918, this was the killer. The virus mutated into a far deadlier strain. Victims went from healthy to deathly ill within hours. Many developed bluish skin from lack of oxygen as their lungs filled with fluid. Entire families died within days of each other. This wave coincided with the end of World War I, when soldiers returning home carried the virus to every corner of the world. Third wave, early 1919, though less lethal than the second wave, it still killed millions more. By the time it burned itself out in 1920, estimates suggest that the Spanish flu infected 500 million people, about 1/3 of the world's population at the time. The death toll? Somewhere between 50 to 100 million lives lost. That's more than the total deaths of World War I and World War II combined. And all of it could be traced back to one ordinary man reporting sick in Kansas. Why was it so deadly? Several factors made this flu uniquely devastating. Healthy adults were the main victims. Unlike normal flu viruses, which hit the very young and old hardest, the Spanish flu often killed strong young adults. Their immune systems overreacted, producing what scientists call a cytokine storm that destroyed their own lungs. War conditions, trench warfare, poor sanitation, and overcrowded military camps provided perfect conditions for the virus to spread unchecked. No antibiotics. While antibiotics wouldn't cure the flu itself, many victims died from secondary bacterial pneumonia. But in 1918, antibiotics hadn't been discovered yet. Doctors had almost no tools to fight it. Global travel. Troop ships moved thousands of soldiers across continents, spreading the virus far faster than in earlier centuries. Stories of horror. The Spanish flu wasn't just numbers, it was horror on a human scale. In Philadelphia, the virus struck so suddenly that bodies piled up faster than they could be buried. The city had to resort to mass graves. Families would wake up to find one or more members dead overnight. In some cases, victims went from feeling fine in the morning to dead by nightfall. Accounts describe people collapsing in the street, their faces turning blue, blood streaming from their noses and ears as their lungs failed. Hospitals were so overwhelmed that doctors often had to choose who to save and who to let die. In many places, schools, theaters, and churches shut down entirely. The world felt like it was ending. Could it have been prevented? Here's the haunting question. If Albert Gitchell hadn't gotten sick that day, or if the outbreak had been contained in Kansas, could millions of lives have been spared? Maybe. Maybe not. Viruses have a way of finding a way. Some historians argue that even without Gitchell, the flu would have surfaced somewhere else. Others believe that his case, coming at the exact wrong place and time, in a massive military camp on the eve of global troop movements, was the critical spark. Either way, his illness became the match that lit the fire. The legacy. The Spanish flu changed medicine forever. After witnessing the devastation, governments and scientists began investing heavily in virology, vaccines, and public health systems. It also reshaped how societies responded to outbreaks, with lessons still relevant today, like during the COVID-19 pandemic a century later. But perhaps the biggest legacy is the sobering reminder that the deadliest killer in history wasn't a warlord, wasn't a dictator, wasn't even intentional. It was an accident. One man, one cough, one moment in time that cascaded into the deaths of tens of millions. Conclusion. History often remembers those who killed deliberately, names like Hitler, Stalin, or Genghis Khan. But the most lethal killer in human history wasn't an evil mastermind. It was one ordinary man, sick in a Kansas Army camp, who unknowingly unleashed a virus that swept the world. It's chilling to think how fragile human life can be, how the smallest accident can ripple across the globe with unimaginable consequences. So next time you hear about pandemics or outbreaks, remember this story, the tale of how Albert Gitchell, an ordinary cook, accidentally became the man who killed the most people in history. If you found this story fascinating, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. There are countless hidden stories in history waiting to be uncovered, and you won't want to miss them.